the citation rate within a school zone.
And who's doing that parking, that illegal parking?
Who are the
Yes,
people?
I mean, basically.
Parents.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
know
that's
this
exactly
Like
why
when
I
you're out
don't drive
moving
my
on.
kids to school, and if I ever do, like, I just had to drive my kid to school, cause he had to take this big box of stuff,
Okay.
but I still dropped him off 2 blocks away, I'm like, I'm not dealing with that.
I gotta get moving, start.
Well, yeah, cause I know if I try to go to the front of Lake Bluff, it's a mess.
It is a nightmare.
So, he griped a little bit, but I'm like, no, this is way easier, I'm just gonna drop you here, you walk across the playground, it's right there. So, I think, that's the point of enforcement, and is to kind of change people's behavior as well.
Correct. It isn't a
So-
money grab, it's really to induce good behavior and follow,
Mhm.
the posted
Yeah,
policies.
Isn't there something we could do in the Shorewood High paper that goes out or something to try to interact with these parents why we do this and why it is only 10 minutes? Just to educate them, to
100%.
internalize and become responsible and understand. I think the big heart of this is we really have to educate everyone to know what their part and piece of responsibility is and for what reason.
Yeah. No, and that's a great idea, and complementing the
Mhm.
education through all these different avenues.
This is why we do it. It
Yeah.
helps you, it helps
Yeah.
them.
Absolutely, and,
Cemeterians.
analogous to what some business owners will do when they notice a peer, a fellow business owner parking on street in front of their stores. Some communities have allowed them, they have formal notices that merchants can put on each other's windshields, saying,
Mhm.
it's fluorescent pink or orange or yellow.
Right.
Put it under the windshield and it says, just a reminder, you're consuming a visitor's space, and we're a visitors first community.
Mhm.
Your business is just as dependent upon mine for success, and and there's a nice little thing there. Some communities they've turned into trash blowing down the street because so many of them were issued. But they try different ways to do peer accountability, and some communities will say we're going to do that first before we implement a citation rate increase. We're going to try peer accountability, but that's dealing with human beings. That's challenging. That takes effort. It takes repetition to build habit and understanding. So some communities just think, well, let's just ordinance this.
Right.
But that human behavior has to play. Yep.
what is the ADA citation rate? Do
We
know?
have that written down. Is it 125? 125.
Far and away the highest.
Yeah,
Right, and
125.
then do we, what is the school zone citation rate?
Right
Quite a
now,
bit lower. I
it'd be the same as was it 20?
I think it's 25.
Yeah.
$25.
And
Yeah.
is it ever enforced?
Pardon?
Is it ever enforced?
I think it's based on a need if it's called in.
Mhm.
There,
Yeah, cause they're not really, I've never seen
There aren't.
the parking, checkers at Lake Bluff
Correct.
in general. I mean, there's not, they're the only ones, or police that can issue citations, right?
yes, and think about it literally. The administration of a ticket that doesn't have a very finite beginning and end when a car parks. It's not like a meter where
Right.
it's expired. That is very clear. You're in
Yeah.
violation.
Someone's gotta be there, see him stop,
Yeah.
Like
put a
at the
timer on,
airport.
and,
If there's just a security guard, like the cops walk up and down when
Yeah,
you're trying
yeah.
to pick if there was just a cop walking around,
Mhm.
or someone in a cop outfit, no.
Deforestation. That's a whole nother conversation.
A security
Yes.
cop. But just walking there during those peak hours, that
Sure.
peak hour.
And I'm very familiar, my wife's a teacher, and she has been out there with a little yellow vest on as the parking
Yeah, there you
attendant.
go.
Oh, good.
Fantastic.
They rotate through it, and
Nice.
they think, this isn't what we should be having
No.
to do, but
But somebody's
it is
doing it.
managing it. And the schools have said, they've expressed the principles, we're willing to help. We're willing to help do this, because it's all about the safety of the kids. The last
Yeah.
thing they want is someone to get struck
Oh, yeah.
by
Right.
an impaired driver, can't see around another car, or the acceleration of aggression because of the frustration. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen, and that's the last thing they want is for there to be an incident there. We talked about accessible parking, and we get into it in detail within the document. I won't go over it now, but I want to make sure Steve has time to talk about the transportation elements and some of the changes, and we have some visuals to walk through as well on that.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
So as we started looking at traffic, transportation, we started with the bones of the system, the street network, and, you know, number one, as people were saying, and we found that to be true, is Shorewood's the most dense community in the state of Wisconsin on a persons per square mile basis. I think second is Whitefish Bay, and then third is Milwaukee, but you got the most people per square mile than anywhere else in Wisconsin. And it was built at a time when the streets were built in, you know, basically what we call grid network, or blocks, and that's the system you have today. And then the nice part is, even though in the last part of the century, we went through the suburban roadway phase with cul-de-sacs and curvilinear roads, grid networks are now back in favor and fashion, and they recognize how beneficial they are for all modes of transportation versus a series of cul-de-sacs or roads that make it difficult to get around. So you do have that going for you. And then this shows the functional network, the classifications. There's basically 4 types of roadways. One is the interstate system, which you folks don't have an interstate going through Shorewood, which is good given your size. Obviously, 43 is about, what, a mile and a half further west, so you can access it relatively easily. The next level, which we show in red, is the what we call the principal arterial. Those are kind of the next level roadways that carry more regional traffic, higher volumes of traffic, can have higher speeds. In this case, higher speeds are 30 miles an hour for certain sections of it, and that's obviously Lake and Capitol and a portion of Oakland to the south. There carries a lot of the traffic through the community. The next level is minor arterial. Again, it carries some regional traffic a little less, the volumes are less, and also serves some of the adjacent land uses. And we have the northern Oakland, because really we get this traffic pattern of people coming up.
People are going to 43.
Yeah,
and-
right.
and-
So, yeah, so that's why this is red and that is green as you go further north in Oakland. Wilson is green, that's another principle. Now, Bart gave us the 84 transportation study and some other studies from before, and they had this almost identical thing. The only difference was Dover right here was not green, it was a collector road. But now the volumes have increased, and then when you look further south into Milwaukee, it's been really upgraded to a minor arterial. And then the yellow are what we call the collector road system. Those are the roads that kind of start to feed the principal and minor arterials and collect traffic throughout the neighborhoods leading them to there. Can we go to the next slide? So the next one is your traffic control. Just about every intersection has some kind of traffic control, whether it's stop sign or traffic signal. There are a few intersections that are uncontrolled, but generally they're at really low volume locations with good visibility. You can see in green are their traffic signals. Again, they're all really just along Capitol and along Oakland. Excuse me. As part of the study, we looked at 3 potential new traffic signals that the community was asking for. One potential signal that we were asked to request was to look at Estabrook, and that was actually kind of driven more by the folks that live in this apartment complex to the south, just to make it easier for them to get on. We looked at some of the volumes, and when we look at a traffic signal, we have to comply in part to the manual uniform traffic control devices in terms of why we put a traffic signal in, and that there's certain warrants or tests, and we really don't need them here. So that was one reason we're not recommending it. The second reason is, and it doesn't show on this map, but when you cross the river, there's another traffic signal right here, and the spacing of these are pretty close. That I think WisDOT's gonna have some issues with progression and keep traffic getting moved. And then last but not least, the other thing is Estabrook, as you go further north into Whitefish Bay, it parallels Wilson. And if we were to put a signal here, we figured that some of this traffic is gonna go there, which is not necessarily bad for Wilson, but we're basically now taking a county park and making that a much busier roadway, and we're not necessarily, I think that's a great idea. So we looked at that, that answer is no. There was a request for another one.
Steve, could you explain, you had something about a U-turn, making a right U-turn out at the Estabrook, or the other park condos?
Yeah, okay.
Where would that U-turn be? I couldn't quite understand how you would accommodate.
Do you have Google Earth?
Yeah.
Oh. So, one solution to help the folks in that apartment complex make a left was actually to make a right, and the median there on Capitol is pretty wide,
Okay.
and if we can pull it, we'll see if we can pull it up quickly enough. Looking at modifying it to allow U-turn, so they can make a right, and then make a U-turn to head back west.
And there's a big planter,
Yeah,
so it's just east of the planter, you can
Yes.
slip around
yeah.
it and
Yeah,
get around? Is that in the turn lane, that left turn?
We're gonna have to
lane?
modify everything a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's an interesting,
yeah, because right now you cannot do that, but you're saying you provide a gap
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
curve.
Internet.
oh, I guess we got rid of.
Yeah, I don't know, it's not on the screen.
It's not-
Okay, so, all right, so,
Okay, that's all right,
All right.
because that, when that was designed
Back to
originally, the road used to be over near the bike trail. and
right,
And there was a lot of, not to allow people to cut across, but just a U-turn might work.
Yeah.
It is a tough intersection.
Sorry, I couldn't
Right.
get the
That's
aerial up.
fine, I was just
Right.
trying to understand. what
so then, the next request was for a traffic signal up here at Kensington, and we did look at that, it does meet the traffic volumes, it could warrant it, and, you know, actually, when you drive it, there's the big red blinking sign, you know,
you're-
that's just saying, I'm a busy intersection, be careful, which means that's really, four-way stops are kind of a stepping stone to a traffic signal, so we're recommending that, it helps with some of the pedestrian crossings there too. And then, we'll talk about this a little later, but Kensington is a future bike boulevard, and so is Murray. When Murray crosses Capitol, there's a traffic signal that'll help facilitate both sides of the village as far as that bike boulevard. This signal here would also then facilitate the bike boulevard crossing Oakland, and, you know, that'll help with that too. So we're recommending that. And then last but not least, some of the residents requested one at Glendale up here, which actually part of that's in the jurisdiction of Whitefish Bay. But again, we looked at the volumes, we're not recommending it, and the reality is, if some people in this neighborhood and even Whitefish Bay are having hard times making a left, they can really just come down here and make the left at the proposed signal at Kensington. So that kind of indirectly addresses at least their concerns at Glendale. Actually, go back.
Sorry.
The next thing we looked at were some of these stop signs. You can see here, clusters of all these always stops in different parts of the village. And one of the things we talked about is, you know, to help with the rolling stop, by not providing so many stop signs, you know, encourages people to obey the ones that are left over. Now, we're not, so we talked about that in very general. One of the things that staff wanted us to do this morning is to actually name specific intersections. So we're gonna come back to you with that. So like say, what was I? So, yeah, I think I was driving through the East Street right here. It's obvious. I don't know why those were put there, and I'm not gonna question why, but we're gonna definitely make changes to some of those.
There's 3 4-way stops.
Yeah, the 3 4-way stops, so.
Yeah.
So we're gonna come back to you with more specific, numbers.
Generally, where four-way stops are consecutive intersections, and it's really difficult for drivers to be patient through all
Yeah,
of
I
those.
just take Lake Bluff.
Yeah, right.
To avoid.
Shift up, yeah, like, well, some of those really fly.
Now, and for pedestrians, I'm just gonna use this map because it kind of shows a lot of areas. We've taken a look at some of the crossings. One of the questions or issues with Jarvis, there's that crosswalk across Lake, and that's really the only crosswalk north of Capitol for that part of the village to cross over and then let them walk down to the Order Park or wherever else they wanna go. And we're recommending, you know, they're concerned about speed or crossing that, so we're recommending some flashers there, or the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And then long-term, we don't necessarily have to implement this right away, but also put some bump outs there to narrow the road so the crossing isn't as long, crossing the 2 lanes, because right now you cross a really wide, parking / bike lane, 2 lanes and another. We would, at the corner, and it would be at the corner, so we don't wanna have parking there anyhow for visibility, we would be putting some bump outs to help shorten that distance. But that could be, I know Lake Street, I'm sorry, not Lake Street, Lake Drive is a brand new road, so we probably wouldn't wanna wait to do that.
It's just a temporary brand new road though too. I was gonna mention at the DPW app this morning, that was just resurfaced as a temporary solution until 2025, when the state will be reconstructing it, so that's actually closer than you'd think.
Yeah.
It was resurfaced because it was in such bad shape to help get us to that 2025, but that's actually a sooner modification then, so I think that's a perfect recommendation.
Okay, is that, when they reconstruct it, are they just gonna reconstruct it more or less as we see it now, just better base?
There was no guarantee, so we modified it to the current configuration, and they were very clear that they could not guarantee that we would stay in that configuration. So this is kind of a test phase to see whether or not this is problematic. I think to this point it's been successful. But yeah, when we resurfaced that, there was a discussion, and they were very clear that we might modify it for this time frame, but in 2025, they might recommend something else, so.
And
Well,
like
they-
Fish Bay did it all the way up through, they just mirrored us all the way up through their village.
This-
And Milwaukee
that's-
wants to do it south of us too, they've indicated.
They don't.
Oh, well, they initially, my understanding, they weren't gonna do it because they didn't have funds for
Oh.
it, but there were advocates, I know, at least Alderman Kovac, had suggested that.
Yeah,
They
and,
wanted to
operationally, it's
slow
a
it
really
down.
nice drive. I mean, the nice thing is, within the village of basically everything is a 2-lane road as far as 1 lane each direction, except for the western part of Capitol and this